They took their shot, quietly. While you were sleeping, they built an economic collapse, unlike anything in modern history. Not a stock market correction, not a recession, but a systemic implosion that will make 2008 look like a dress rehearsal. In March 2000, the dot-com bubble burst. $5 trillion in market value evaporated in 2 years. Companies with no revenue and absurd valuations collapsed overnight. Pets.com, Webvan, eToys, gone. The Nasdaq fell 78%. Millions lost their savings. But here's what people forget. Those companies represented maybe 10% of the total stock market. The damage was contained. The economy survived. In 2008, the subprime mortgage crisis nearly destroyed the global financial system. Lehman Brothers collapsed. AIG needed a $182 billion bailout. Unemployment hit 10%. That crisis originated in the housing market, roughly 20% of the economy. But it almost ended civilization as we know it. Now, in 2025, we're watching a far more dangerous bubble taking shape. The bubble on which we rely for our everyday tasks. Yes, the AI industry. But what people forget is that this industry isn't 10% of the market. It isn't 20%. Right now, 7 technology companies are betting everything on artificial intelligence, now representing over 1/3 of the entire S&P 500's value. These aren't small players. They're the foundation of the American stock market. And the American stock market represents more than half of all stocks on planet Earth. When this bubble bursts, and it will burst, the consequences won't be limited to Silicon Valley, or tech workers losing jobs, or startups going bankrupt. This is about pension funds, retirement accounts, sovereign wealth funds, central banks, all holding trillions in assets that are built on a foundation of financial engineering, circular money flows, and companies that lose billions of dollars every single year. The AI bubble will trigger a collapse that cascades through the entire global economy. Because unlike the dot-com crash or the housing crisis, this bubble has infected the core of American capital markets. And the warning signs are everywhere if you know where to look. This is the story of how the most advanced technology of our generation became the most dangerous financial trap in history. How companies created the illusion of value through self-dealing. How billions in losses get disguised as billions in investment. Let's start with the scheme at the center of everything. The financial scam that's propping up valuations that make no rational sense. Because what's happening right now isn't investment, it's a sophisticated shell game where the same dollars chase themselves in circles, creating the illusion of growth where none actually exists. Nvidia. The company went from making graphics cards for gamers to becoming the most valuable corporation on Earth. Over $4 trillion in market value. Why? Because its chips power roughly 90% of the world's AI infrastructure. Every major AI project, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google's Gemini, Meta's Llama, they all run on Nvidia hardware. The company prints money because AI companies can't function without their processors. But here's where it gets twisted. In September 2024, Nvidia announced a $100 billion investment in OpenAI. $100 billion. That's not a typo. The chip manufacturer is investing in its largest customer. On the surface, that sounds reasonable, right? Strategic partnership, synergy, the kind of deal that gets investors excited. Except follow the money. Where does OpenAI get the computational power to build ChatGPT? From Nvidia chips. And how does OpenAI pay for those chips? With the $100 billion that Nvidia just gave them. The money flows from Nvidia to OpenAI, and then immediately flows right back to Nvidia to purchase the only product OpenAI actually needs. Think about what that means. Imagine you own a car dealership and sales are slowing down. So you invest $1 million in your neighbor's business. Your neighbor then uses that exact $1 million to buy cars from you. On paper, you just made $1 million in revenue. Your sales numbers look incredible. Investors see the transaction and think your dealership must be thriving. The stock price goes up. Your neighbor's business valuation goes up. Everybody wins. Except nobody created anything. No value was generated. You just moved money in a circle and called it growth. That's not an investment. That's financial engineering disguised as commerce. And it's happening across the entire AI industry on a scale that should terrify you. Bloomberg analyzed the financial relationships between major tech companies in the AI space. The web of circular investments is staggering. Nvidia invests in OpenAI. OpenAI buys Nvidia chips. Microsoft invests in OpenAI. OpenAI uses Microsoft's Azure cloud infrastructure. Amazon invests in Anthropic. Anthropic runs on Amazon Web Services. Google invests in AI startups that buy Google Cloud Compute. Oracle invests in AI companies that lease Oracle data centers. The same dollars cycling through the same companies, each transaction inflating valuations, each deal generating revenue that gets reported as genuine growth. But analysts at Goldman Sachs estimate that these circular arrangements will account for approximately 15% of Nvidia's total sales in the coming year. 15%. That's not a rounding error. That's a structural component of their business model. But here's the first rehook, the part that should make your blood run cold. This isn't even the most dangerous aspect of the scheme, because at least when Nvidia invests in OpenAI and gets its money back through chip sales, there's a real product changing hands. Hardware exists. Data centers get built, transactions occur. The real trap is what happens when you look at the other side of these deals, when you examine the companies receiving all this investment capital. Because Nvidia is worth $4 trillion based on the assumption that its customers. These AI companies will continue buying chips forever, scaling up, expanding, and generating revenue that justifies the spending. But what if the customers themselves are built on quicksand? What if the companies Nvidia is betting everything on are financial black holes that lose more money the more successful they become? What if the entire AI industry is structured in a way that makes profitability mathematically impossible? That's not a hypothetical. That's exactly what's happening. But the numbers are worse than anyone wants to admit. To see how deep the problem really goes, look at the most valuable AI company in the world, OpenAI. It is valued at approximately $500 billion, making it one of the most valuable private companies on Earth, more valuable than most Fortune 500 corporations. But according to reporting from the Wall Street Journal, OpenAI is projected to lose more than $70 billion over the next 3 years. Read that again. $70 billion in losses. Not revenue, not expenditures that will eventually generate profit. Pure, unrecoverable losses. But this isn't a startup finding its footing. This is a company that already has hundreds of millions of users. ChatGPT is one of the fastest growing products in history. And every single user makes the problem worse. Because here's the nightmare scenario that nobody wants to talk about. AI companies lose money on every customer interaction. When you send a prompt to ChatGPT, when you ask it to write an email or summarize a document or generate code, that request costs OpenAI money. Pennies, sometimes dollars, depending on the complexity. The computational power required to process natural language, search through billions of parameters, and generate coherent responses is staggeringly expensive. Training the models costs hundreds of millions. A single high-end Nvidia chip can cost $40,000. Multiply that by tens of thousands of chips. Then add the electricity to power those chips because these data centers consume as much energy as small cities. Then add the cooling systems to keep the hardware from melting. Then add the real estate, the infrastructure, and the researchers. But here's the kicker. More money is being spent building AI data centers right now than all other manufacturing facilities in the United States combined. Think about that. More capital goes into buildings filled with computers than into factories that make cars, steel, medicine, food, or anything else humans actually need to survive. And these aren't investments that appreciate over time like roads or bridges. This is where the infrastructure comparison falls apart completely. Advocates love to say, we don't call building highways a bubble just because there's an upfront cost with no immediate return. And that sounds reasonable until you understand the fundamental difference. Build a railroad in 1880, and it's still useful in 1920. Build a bridge, and it stands for a century. Build a highway, and barring maintenance, it functions indefinitely. But build a data center in 2024, fill it with $100 million worth of cutting-edge GPUs, and by 2029, that hardware is worthless. The technology moves too fast. The chips degrade from constant use, running at maximum capacity, generating heat and shortening their operational lifespan every single day. But even if they don't physically degrade, they become outdated. Next-generation models require next-generation hardware. The AI industry isn't building infrastructure. It's building depreciating assets with a 5-year shelf life. So the clock is ticking. All of this investment, all of these billions, all of these circular financial arrangements have an expiration date. And if AI companies can't figure out how to become profitable before the hardware becomes obsolete or before the money runs out, the entire structure collapses. But wait, there's more. Because OpenAI isn't an outlier. The entire large language model industry operates on the same broken economics. Anthropic, the company behind Claude, has billions in losses. Google's AI division has massive expenditures with unclear returns. Meta spent $40 billion on AI development in a single year. Microsoft is pouring resources into AI integration across every product line. Every single one of these companies is betting that somehow, eventually, the economics will work. That AI will become so revolutionary that customers will pay enough to cover the costs. They're selling the dream of artificial general intelligence, technology so powerful it can do any intellectual task a human can do. If they achieve that, sure, it justifies everything. But that's a faith-based argument. It's not economics. It's not a business strategy. It's a gamble that future breakthroughs will bail out present-day losses, and history is littered with technologies that promised everything and delivered bankruptcy. Remember fiber optic networks in 2000? Companies spent billions laying cable for the internet revolution. The cables exist. The internet exists, but the companies that built the infrastructure, most of them collapsed before they saw a return. But here's the second rehook, the detail that turns this from concerning to catastrophic. Even if you believe AI will eventually be profitable, even if you think AGI is right around the corner, even if you're convinced the technology will change everything, there's still a systemic problem that makes collapse inevitable. The entire AI bubble isn't isolated to AI companies. It's woven into the fabric of the American economy. And when it fails, it won't just take down tech stocks. It will detonate the foundation of global capital markets. Here's where we need to talk about concentration risk. Because this isn't about whether AI is real or whether the technology has value. This is about what happens when 1/3 of the entire American stock market is betting on the same outcome, using the same playbook, heading towards the same cliff. The Magnificent Seven, Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon, Nvidia, Meta, Tesla, these 7 companies represent roughly 33% of the S&P 500's total market capitalization. 1/3. And every single one of them is heavily invested in AI infrastructure, AI development, and AI integration. Their valuations are built on the assumption that AI will generate trillions in future revenue. Now, let's add perspective. The combined market value of these 7 companies equals approximately $15 trillion. That's the entire economy of China, the world's second largest economy with 1.4 billion people. In decades of manufacturing dominance, that's what 7 American tech companies are supposedly worth. Nvidia alone is valued at over $4 trillion. That's more than the entire Japanese stock market. Japan, the world's 3rd largest economy, a nation of 125 million people with centuries of industrial history, is worth less than 1 chipmaker in California. Does that sound sustainable? Does that sound rational? Or does that sound like 1999, when Pets was valued at $300 million, despite losing money on every transaction? When WebN raised $800 million to deliver groceries at a loss, when companies with zero revenue had billion-dollar valuations because they had calm in their name? The difference is scale. In 2000, the AI bubble represented maybe 10% of the market. Today, it's 33%. But American stocks represent more than half of global equity value, which means this isn't just an American problem. When the AI bubble bursts, it will ripple through every pension fund, every sovereign wealth fund, every retirement account, every institutional portfolio on Earth. Because here's what happens in a collapse. It doesn't matter if your portfolio is diversified. When the S&P 500 falls 40% because 7 companies lose $10 trillion in value, your index funds collapse with it. Your 401k gets cut in half. Your retirement timeline gets extended by a decade. But that's just individuals. Think about institutional investors. CalPERS, the California Public Employees Retirement System, manages over $450 billion. A significant portion of that is in equities, heavily weighted toward these exact companies. When valuations crater, pension obligations don't disappear. The money to pay retirees has to come from somewhere. Either benefits get cut, or taxes go up, or the fund goes insolvent. Sovereign wealth funds from Norway, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, Abu Dhabi, they hold trillions in American equities. When those assets lose half their value overnight, it's not just a paper loss, it's geopolitical instability. It's governments scrambling to cover budget shortfalls. It's a loss of confidence in American markets. But here's the systemic risk nobody's pricing in. This AI bubble is fundamentally different from previous crashes. The dot-com bubble burst because companies had no revenue. The 2008 crisis exploded because banks were over-leveraged with bad mortgages, but those were contained sectors. You could let Lehman Brothers fail. You could watch dot-coms evaporate. The rest of the economy kept functioning. But AI isn't a sector. It's been integrated into the core valuation of the largest companies on Earth. Microsoft's stock price isn't just Microsoft anymore. It's Microsoft plus the AI revolution. Google's valuation isn't search and ads. It's search and ads plus AI dominance. These companies have staked their entire future growth on AI delivering returns that justify the spending. When that thesis breaks, when investors realize the returns aren't coming, when the circular money flows stop because nobody wants to keep funding losses, the collapse won't be gradual. It will be instant. Because market psychology works in one direction during a bubble, greed, and one direction during a crash, panic. This is the pattern. Every bubble follows the same trajectory. Irrational exuberance, circular financial engineering, valuations detached from fundamentals, true believers insisting the old rules don't apply. But then, suddenly, catastrophically, reality reasserts itself. So where does that leave us? There's no simple solution here. Or is there one? In theory, there is. You stop funding losses and make companies live within what they earn. You price them on what they make, not what they promise. But the moment you do that, the value of these companies drops instantly, and the system can't handle it. So everyone keeps delaying the hard choices. That's why the only question left is timing. Do we have a year, 2 years, 5? Nobody knows. But the math is absolute. You cannot lose $70 billion and call it a business model. You cannot inflate valuations through self-dealing indefinitely. You cannot build an entire economy on companies that lose money on every transaction. But when the collapse comes, not if, when, it won't announce itself politely. There won't be warnings. It will be a single catalyst. Maybe OpenAI admits it can't reach profitability. Maybe Nvidia's sales start declining as circular investments dry up. Maybe a single major AI company folds and triggers a chain reaction. Whatever the spark, the fire spreads instantly, because that's how bubbles end. Not with analysis or debate or gradual repricing, with panic, with liquidation, with everyone rushing for the exits simultaneously, but discovering there's no bid on the other side. The AI bubble will trigger an economic collapse unlike any we've seen before. We built a $15 trillion fantasy on top of a foundation that loses money by design, propped it up with financial engineering, and convinced ourselves the rules of economics no longer apply. They do, they always do, and we're about to relearn that lesson the hardest way possible. If this opens your eyes to what's actually being built right now, and if you want to learn what S coming next, subscribe.